Hi, welcome back to Job Opportunity, and today we have Mrs. Jennifer Lee Coe, who's an expert in immigration law and has published papers that have been cited in the U.S. Supreme Court. She's currently teaching at Pepperdine Caruso School of Law and has taught at the University of California Irvine School of Law, University of Washington School of Law, Stanford Law School, and Western State College of Law. Ms. Coe, how are you today?
Oh, I'm great. How are you?
I'm doing well myself. Today we are asking her a few questions about your job. To start off, can you briefly explain your profession as a professor, a lawyer, and a nonprofit founder?
Yeah, so I guess the one thing I would say to sum up my career is that it has evolved and gone through change. So, in fact, as we speak, I'm just in a little bit of transition myself. I start my position at Pepperdine Law School next week. So my background is a picture of the campus, which actually really does look like that. So at Pepperdine, I'll primarily be teaching law school courses. So for example, in the fall, I'll be teaching criminal law. In the spring, I'll be teaching evidence. But over the past several decades, I've spent time representing clients. I've supervised law students to represent clients. Often our clients have been immigrants who have been detained and facing deportation, people seeking asylum, people who have lived here for a really long time.
Well, congratulations first and foremost on the Pepperdine job. And could you really describe what the transition is like from going from a professor and your other jobs before that? What is, I think, your biggest change in life?
So, I guess if I look back even further over my time, just like as a lawyer generally, right? So for example, from the time I graduated from law school, probably the biggest changes for me have been between moving sectors. So for example, earlier on in my career, I worked for a nonprofit organization doing legal services work. And then I made this switch to work for a big law firm. And I was at a big law firm for 4 years. And that was in the corporate sector, right? Corporate private sector. And then made this decision to shift gears a little bit more and leave big law, which is sort of what we call it when people work for big law firms, and then to go into teaching and immigration work. So even though I was a lawyer during all those years, those were kind of the biggest shifts. I made the decision to go into law teaching. It's been now 13 or 14 years. So since then, the shifts haven't been as dramatic, right? It's sort of been from law school to law school, as you've mentioned, but definitely making the sector shifts, right? Those have been the biggest changes over time.
And could you describe the differences when treating your clients between the nonprofit that you worked for and the private sector that you worked for?
Yeah, I guess in some ways it's not that different in the sense that you want to provide the best service and the best work, right? You want to be thorough. You want to put your effort into it. You want to do the best job possible. But I would say the biggest difference is the level of emotional attachment and investment. It's very different when you're working for a corporate client and you're one of several lawyers on a team. And, even for the client, it's a company, so there are different representatives of the company. Maybe you're talking to the CEO, or maybe you're talking to the general counsel. And of course, people will care. And, sometimes people really care a lot, especially if it's a smaller company or, it's their careers. Other times it's a matter of litigating over a sum of money, and there will be a settlement. So there's not quite as much emotional attachment. And it's very different than when you're working with a client who, literally their whole life depends on what you're doing, right? Literally their life, their ability to see their children again, their ability to be safe, a question of whether they will continue to be incarcerated or not. Like that will kind of depend in part on your efforts. Of course, it depends on other things as well. Sometimes it depends on random factors like the judge that you're assigned to. Sometimes it just depends on like events that have happened in their past. You can't sort of change what someone's past events are and the facts that they bring to a case. But definitely, there's this level of like just emotional investment and attachment and really feeling like you're going to make a huge difference.
What do you think is the most rewarding part of your job?
I guess it depends on which part of the job we're referring to. So I'm moving into a position where I'm not really going to be representing clients as often. But I guess I would say it's two things. One is that like the client victories, especially when working with poor people, immigrants, people who have really high stakes, like there really is this kind of rush of just satisfaction and joy that you experience when a client has prevailed, and we're talking sort of like, kind of Lifetime TV type lawyering movies where the client is just emotional and crying and there's lots of hugging and there's like kind of stepping outside of a jail and stepping into freedom. So that is really satisfying. But I guess the other part of it is as a teacher, like there's this huge reward that comes from seeing students grow. And that happens like when I talk, sometimes they blend, like, so in my former jobs where I was working with students who are actually doing cases like that. And I got to see like the student experience that joy along with me with the client. But even like in a sort of big classroom, I think there's a certain joy of seeing students grow and like seeing them learn, seeing them realize things about themselves, like, the student who sort of never speaks during class and then musters up the courage to raise their hand. And then like, they're still okay after having spoken in class. And so like kind of being part of that, just learning and empowerment process to me is, it's really gratifying.
And let's throw it back a little bit to your education growing up. Did you always want to go into law growing up, or was it something that just happened?
I think a little bit of both. When you're a kid, like there are just all kinds of things that you think about. But I was pretty interested in, I think, questions of like justice. And I think from a fairly early age, I wanted my work to be meaningful and to make a difference.
And how long did it really take to grow your career in the beginning, and how much did you struggle and stress at the beginning of your career?
Yeah, quite a bit. I feel like I'm still in that growth process. I feel like I'm still struggling and stressing over different aspects of my work. I'm preparing new classes. Like as we were waiting to talk, I'm revising this essay that I'll be publishing later this summer. Like all of these things are still sources of struggle and they're still sources of stress. I do think the first 10 years at least were like in particular, maybe more challenging, right? Because I think there was a longer period in the beginning where when I was going from the nonprofit world to a big law firm and finally finding my way into teaching, like that also involved a lot of soul searching and questioning and like asking myself where I wanted to be. And so there were a lot of like struggles and questions along the way. And then I think there's also just the learning that happens. Again, like I feel like I'm still learning. I still feel like I have so much to learn.
What would you say your biggest advice would be to those people who are struggling in the beginning of their career as a lawyer?
I guess this is like nothing new, but I think a lot of people have said it is so helpful to have mentors and people who you can talk to. And if not like, more experienced mentors, even colleagues who you can, sort of talk your struggles through. I feel like that matters a lot. There's all the other things of sort of like figuring out what you want and doing the soul searching and reflecting on what's important to you and who you are. And I think that's sort of conventional advice.
Thank you for your time today, Mrs. Koh. Do you have any last words for those high schoolers who need an idea on what to pursue in life?
Wherever you're at now is not a prediction of where you will be in the future.
Wow, great piece of advice. Thank you.